Now to the Golden State of Florida, and senior editor-at-large at Newsweek, Josh Hammer, joins me. Josh, the past few weeks have really shown us the horrifying reality of the left's long march through the institutions. You wrote in the Daily Mail about this issue. You wrote the most prestigious universities in America. We're talking here about Harvard, Cornell, Columbia, where anti-Semitism, the world's oldest and, as you said, most politically correct form of bigotry, now pervades faculty lounges and campus quads. The last 2 weeks has certainly, Josh, opened the eyes of a lot of people across the political spectrum.
Yeah, Rita, always great to be with you. I wish we were under better circumstances, alas. But, Jew hatred on the American university campus is not exactly a new phenomenon. What is new, I think, is just how bad it has gotten. It has gotten increasingly totally intolerable. I mean, I hear from friends who are in college, who are in law school and graduate school right now, that they are borderline afraid sometimes to just show up to class and to wear a Magen David, wear a kippah, wear any kind of indication that they are Jewish. I mean, look at the response to the Hamas war on Israel from the past 2 weeks. At Harvard, of course, you had 31 student groups sign this repulsive, disgusting letter saying that Israel bore the entire blame for the massacre, the pogrom inflicted on its own citizens. At Cornell University, another Ivy League school, you had a history professor by the name of Russell Rickford who said that he found it awesome and exhilarating to watch those Hamas jihadist paragliders swoon in on this concert, mowing down 260 innocent lives, raping God knows how many others. And the list just goes on and on and on. There's a professor at Columbia University who said something very similar. But it's not just the professors. Again, it's the students themselves. We've seen at least 30, I think closer probably to 35 to 40 Students for Justice in Palestine, student chapters all across America who unequivocally said they stand with Gaza. They stand with Hamas because this is justified resistance. Look, Hamas is indistinguishable from ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or any other genocidal form of Islamist Sunni jihadist outfit. It is a U.S., EU recognized terrorist group. And, look, Rita, unfortunately, on the American university campus, there is a long and inglorious history of standing with forces of civilizational arson and, frankly, just all-out evil. I mean, go back to the 1960s, really kind of the beginning of the modern campus radicals. They were standing with folks like Angela Davis, Assata Shakur. I mean, they stood with terrorists back then. They defended Bill Ayers and the Weather Underground, the domestic bombings. They defended all of that back then. So I guess it's only kind of the natural progression that they would get to where we are now, where you see legitimate defenses of genocide against the Jewish people on some of America's purportedly most prestigious university campuses. It's just appalling. Unfortunately, like I said, it is logically consistent. It is a logical outgrowth of where the left has been going for the past 40, 50 years or so. The only way I think this possibly stops is if people who have some sort of market power and can shift the supply and demand curves actually use that market power effectively. So to put some teeth on that, if you are a donor to an institution, you should not be giving a penny to any institution that has done anything other than unequivocally condemn Hamas and put the blame for this tragedy squarely on Hamas. If you are a parent, you should not be sending your schools to these universities, no matter how quote unquote prestigious they are, if they cannot take a very basic stand on this sort of stark issue, this morally dichotomous issue of good versus evil. Finally, if you are an employer or a graduate school admissions officer and someone who signed on to one of these appalling statements comes across your desk to be hired or admitted to graduate school, you should not hire or admit that person. So that is really the only way that this possibly ends, Rita. But unfortunately, as I wrote in that Daily Mail article, it has really been a very, very difficult 2 weeks, I think, for Jews all around the world, just to see this very ancient hatred rise yet again.
It has been so ugly, and so many academics have not only sought to minimise, rationalise, sometimes just straight out defend what Hamas unleashed on civilians on October 7, but they've also said more broadly, this is what decolonisation means. So we've been talking about decolonisation increasingly. What did you think it meant? As if that is, again, some sort of a justification. But I think a lot of eyes have been opened, Josh. Those of us who pay attention to the modern left aren't terribly surprised. But I think a lot of people who are not that politically engaged are utterly shocked by what they've seen in the past 2 weeks and the reaction from the West. Now, let's talk about the Biden White House and their, well, losing complete control of the southern border. The latest numbers just illustrate that perfectly. US Customs and Border Protection reports there were almost 270,000 migrant encounters at the southern border in September, making it the highest single month ever recorded. They're the ones that were encountered. There are plenty more who are not encountered crossing that border, but 270,000 encounters in a month is astonishing in itself. And their annual reports also are setting records. 2023 fiscal year, there were 2.47 million encounters. That's the highest ever recorded in a single year. In fact, the Biden administration has now set the all-time record for migrant encounters at the southern border. These are illegal entries for the last 3 years in a row. So 2021, there were 1.7 million, 2022, close to 2.4 million, and this year, this financial year, we've seen 2.5 million, close to 2.5 million. Josh, these numbers are out of control, and we're talking about the entire population of somewhere like Pittsburgh crossing illegally every single month. What has been the response to this data?
Well, it's absolutely out of control. I mean, you are totally correct, of course, to phrase it that way. By the way, going back to that final tweet of the Fox reporter Bill Malugin that we just showed the audience here, you saw the marked contrast from that to the final year of Trump's presidency, which was about 500,000. I mean, talk about night and day here.
Yes.
But, you know, we're also talking about a time of an emboldened global jihad right now. We're talking about a time when jihadists, frankly, are marching openly in the streets in the United States of Chicago, Washington, D.C. They're marching openly in the streets of Europe, whether it's London, Brussels, Paris, you name it. They're right there, of course, in Australia. I saw that appalling footage of the folks going to the Sydney Opera House chanting to gas the Jews. So we're dealing with a time where I think radical Muslims all across the world are, frankly, more emboldened than they have been since ISIS had its so-called caliphate itself in Iraq and Syria. And that I say all that because that contextualizes just how important it is now, of all times, for the United States to control its extraordinarily porous southern border. In fact, I saw a number, I think it was a day or two ago. I think the number of people who were caught at that border who were on the U.S. terror watch list last year was about 160 or so. And if that's the number that they caught,
wow,
who knows how many let in? I mean, if they caught 160 to 165, maybe there are 100, maybe there are even thousands inside the United States interior right now. Who knows? There could be Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iranian spy rings. Those people could be right embedded in our very communities. I mean, who knows what they're planning here if they were able to successfully plan what they did in Gaza two and a half weeks ago or so. So the situation from a security perspective is just absolutely atrocious. Unfortunately, I don't see a ton of signs of this administration starting to get it together. Yes, there was some chatter a couple weeks ago about Joe Biden and Secretary Mayorkas, his ham-fisted Secretary of Homeland Security. There was some chatter about them finally starting to build some segments of a border wall. Thus far, I have not seen a whole lot of proof of that. They issued some sort of statement, but I have really not seen a heck of a lot of follow-through. Look, Rita, ultimately, when it gets to the issue of illegal immigration, it is such a straightforward issue, which is one of the reasons why I find this so immensely frustrating. People respond to incentives. If you say that you were going to immediately turn back, if you were going to immediately send back to the country of origin someone who is trying to come across your border illegally, or who's going to claim a bogus asylum claim, who is trying to cross because they are there for economic reasons, which is contrary to United States immigration law, that's not a legitimate asylum claim. If you say that you're going to enforce all that, then the cartels aren't going to take people because they know that they're not going to profit. It's not going to work. All you have to do is say that you are going to enforce the law as written. Donald Trump, to his credit, did that successfully. He could have gone a little further, in my opinion. The border wall, of course, was not successfully built in its entirety, but it was a much better start. Joe Biden right now, they are totally lawless. The door is wide open, and God help us, because like I said, we do not know the mid to long-term security repercussions of this.
Now, the question is, will the dodgy house of Biden crumble at some point, or will the protection racket he's enjoyed continue. We've got the son, Hunter, facing some minor charges. There's a lot more he should be indicted for, if you ask me. But we are learning some fresh details that raise even more red flags. The Daily Mail reports that Joe Biden bought another beach house and all in cash. We're talking $2.7 million purchase here. And it was within weeks of a text that Hunter Biden sent a Chinese associate demanding to finalise a $10 million a year deal. In that text, Hunter starts the text with, "I'm sitting here with my father, and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled." And it goes on from there. Josh, I have plenty of questions here, including how a crack-addicted whore enthusiast with no discernible skills can demand $10 million a year.
Who knows? I mean, who knows how he was profiting? I think it was $83,000 a month roughly from Burisma. Look, I mean, credit to Congressman James Comer of Kentucky on the House Oversight Committee for getting this impeachment inquiry started a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, there's really been no follow-up on this. I mean, I think many of us were actually excited to see what House Republicans might be able to come up with. They were trying to reach the apex of their powers. When you declare an impeachment inquiry, it kind of accentuates the House's ability to subpoena documents and all sorts of other abilities there. But there's been very little follow through. Of course, the U.S. House itself is currently in standstill because House Republicans seem woefully incapable of electing someone to be Speaker. So I would like to see a little more progress on this. I happen to think that it is both the correct thing to do, morally speaking, and also happens to be good politics for Republicans if they can actually get their act together on this. But the American people, I think, are paying attention more when these stories come out. I mean, it's just been such a slow trickle, Rita, for years now. Every single data point we learn about how crooked and corrupt this family is when it comes to Ukraine, to Romania, there in Eastern Europe, of course, to China itself. Hunter Biden has been indicted for gun crimes. And, you know, I've reviewed the relevant criminal statutes in the U.S. Criminal Code. It's extraordinarily straightforward. Under any definition of what those statutes actually read there in the U.S. Code, I think it's like 18 U.S. Code section 922. I can't remember the exact citation. Hunter Biden is guilty for sure. I mean, look, I mean, he's innocent until proven guilty. I mean, he will get his trial there. But if I understand the facts correctly, they fit the crime very, very well. So we will know. We will know just how much the gig is up, whether or not he gets off on those gun crimes. But the gun crimes, and here's the key point, those gun crimes are they're really a distraction. They're a distraction from all of the international mayhem.
Yes.
I want to see Hunter Biden ultimately investigated for FARA, for possible kind of Foreign Agent Registration Act violations, for all sorts of money laundering, for tax evasion. To me, that is the more interesting stuff. And the fact that we have not seen any movement on that, either from the special counsel or again from the House impeachment inquiry, to me, that shows that there was a lot of work left to be done on this subject.
Absolutely. Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Rita.